Uh,
so forth.
the reason why there is, these some of these townships, especially on the Witwatersrand, although it happened nationally, or some of these locations are former concentration camps. If you understand concentration camps, the old Boer War, where it's well known, during the war, people were put in these camps, white, black, yeah. Now, the very name here, Juliwe, to me, sounds in Xhosa, it's Xhosa. The one who say Juliwe means something which has been thrown away, sort of. So probably the residents at the early days of the location came with this Juliwe name, because we all know these concentration camps were like you thrown away, ignored there, fend for yourselves, and especially the black concentration camps. Although there hasn't been much work on the interrogation yet on these black concentration camps, but there is information here and there, so that's why I suspect Juliwe started out as a concentration camp. Because if you look at the history of these camps along the Witwatersrand, especially along the railway line from, let's say, Klerksdorp or Potchefstroom up until Springs, Potchefstroom, Randfontein, these things were planted along the railway lines,
The concentration camp.
these camps. The motive being, actually, the British Army at the time, there were these squabbles, the Boers. Now, they took these groups of people where, if you read the work by this Franz Johann Pretorius, all of these things were put there so that black people can keep an eye on the railway line. Because there was this guerrilla warfare when these railway lines were blown off by the Boers. So after the war, you had these concentration camps now. What are we going to do with them? That's how it came up with the Native Affairs Commissions around about 1903 or so. What do we do with these?
Former concentration camp.
Yeah, of the blacks, more or less. And the motive being, well, with the Witwatersrand, we've seen there's gold here. Now, how do we get the gold out of the ground? We need labor here. So slowly, gradually, these things are turned into labor camps, which would explain, locations or townships like Juliwe, which later became Dobsonville after some years. But because here in Roodepoort there was only one black concentration camp, and we're talking the year 1902 thereabouts, and it's not like as we see the scenario now. Probably it was an open field from Roodepoort to here. There were no houses, there were no Dobsonville, Bramfisher, or, now this camp was the only one. Yeah, the black people. It was called the Bungees concentration camps. It being called the Bungees concentration camp because there was a gold prospector in the farm, yeah, where you now have Florida, and the Florida Lake, which was called Fontein, and the mine was called Bungees Consolidated. Later, it was bought by Anglo-Boer, you know, these people at 56 Main Street, to rent leases, which is presently rent leases now. Now, I think because this camp was far from the railway line, it was moved to where Juliwe was. It's here only, if you look at the, what do you call this thing? There's a mine here in Devon Deep, an Australian company. It did some research and asked people in Brownfisher and to come make an input environmental impact assessment. Yeah, if you read that, the sketches, the pictures are GPS, which show this Bungees
concentration camp.
Yeah, it's no longer a concentration camp, but its location. There's a place there called Bungees. Although the mine here was called Bungees. Africans used to have nicknames for these mines. Like this one, go Devon Deep, we were called Guamsat. Then the other one was Guamtonon.
Why?
I think the migrant workers used to have nicknames for these mines. All over the Witwatersrand. Yeah. And because it was opened by Gerrit Bungees. Now nearby Bisakwa Bungees. Yeah. And if you look at that work by Eric Mungalo, only map of these concentration camps, you can see they are along the railway line, up to roundabout Porchester. There's one there called Bungees concentration camp. I'm talking the black
concentration.
Yeah. Now, we're talking 1902 thereabouts. Now the war is over. There's no need for these camps now. What do we do with these black people? And we've got gold to dig here. These mines are still new. So they are turned around into labor camps where, and the camps of the Boers were better in terms of treatment, you know, but there is, you know, work done on these black ones because conditions were terrible. If you read Mungalo's account here, these things were terrible. Now, then these things slowly, they are changing because now they introduce a department who is going to look after these natives, called the Native Refugee Department. That transition from the military to the civilians, where you start to see these locations falling into civilian rule, being ruled by town councils now. Yeah. So that evolution, that early evolution, but the residents that are on these camps would have known because the name itself says it's just like we thrown away here. At the time you got no streets, and that site is ideal because it's next to the railway line, which is a requirement of these. It must be next to the railway line to keep an eye on the Boers. It must be next to a stream or some river with water. Mustn't be far away. As you can see, there was a stream if you go to Westgate. It's now a park. That stream used to be there. It had to be, the third requirement was, it must be far away from the military barracks, which was quite a distance from all the, but the soldiers would be able to monitor what's going on, not far from the barracks.
Okay, so
We
you
set,
had to be closer to the barracks.
yeah, quite a apart from the barracks, but within reach.
Okay.
Yeah, which Juliwe satisfied those conditions if you grew up there and you know the place. Because you had the barracks here in Roodepoort. Now in the barracks you can see Motabeng. Yeah, anybody who more barracks can see what's going on in these locations. There are no longer camps. Eh. Now because Bungees now was far away from the railway line, and in there was a stream there. If you pass this set of robots, when you go to there's a dip going towards Filerov. That used to be a stream. So it's no longer there, it's dried up now, like the very one in Juliwe. So that given for the origins that Juliwe, hence the name. Well, I'm not quite sure about that, but the dots add up here. Yeah, you know, where after the war now, around 1905, you start to get these municipalities and town councils. And you have this native department, controlling the blacks up until various legislations which controlled black people. That's how I think Juliwe started. And there is, documentation is very scarce because most of the work that has been done on these camps is very little. And especially historians have tended to, the black experience hasn't been accounted for. Various information has been done about the white concentration camps. You go to Bloemfontein, you go to Pretoria, commemoration after commemoration about the war, where we ourselves participated in that war, either on either side of the British and the Boers. But our story is not told in these concentration camps. Even people like Bo Emily Hophouse, who was sent from England to come and check the conditions more in the campaigns in, and the Fockett Commission, they all came from England. They never bothered to go to the camps about or black people. And the military itself not keeping records, and many people died in this, especially children. Starvation, malnutrition, and measles, and all these diseases because of poor sanitation, poor living conditions. It was terrible. But historians have somehow, I don't know how to put it over. The black experience has never been well documented here, up until where we are now, which is sad. Recent of these historians have commented, there's this gap of the black experience, which is not told. And understandably, if the black people themselves, the educated historians themselves, do not care to interrogate this, I'm talking, after the war up to 1910, 1920. Yeah, we'll deal with 1920 and another time, where you find out these locations, you know, the influx of people, you know, the slum conditions here and you know, but there's a missing story here about the conditions in these camps. Understandably, information about them was not so much kept by the British military, you know, like having proper records, you know, of people interned in these entries. But there is evidence. If you go to the Roodepoort Cemetery, Roodepoort West Cemetery, the Juliwe, it's now called Horizon. Those of us who know that cemetery will see, well, there's a section of the cemetery there which, if maybe you find some of these researchers who did similar work in Kimberley, digging these cemeteries to find or know, well, because some of these these graves, you used to bury, the way people were dying, you used to bury three in one grave. And I'm sure at the time, people were dying like flies here because of measles and things. Now, recently, more people like Bogart Pennyworth have done research in Kimberley, Dry Hearts and these other places, you know, using these sensing things, or how deep is the grave and there is work to try and determine, you know, what exactly happened here, because there are no records. The records you have is about the Boers. So he reckons sometimes the way people were dying, you would find three people being buried in one grave, which I suspect, if a similar thing could be done there, at Juliwe Cemetery, at Horizon View, it could reveal this kind of, now the thing is, it's a heritage site now. You've got to get permission for that and be a serious researcher and stuff like that. So what I'm trying to say here is the history of what you call Dobsonville, because Dobsonville is from Juliwe or Roodepoort West location, and that location is from Bungees. Now that would need further research, you know, to kind of trace or well. And what would help again is the minutes of the town clerk of Roodepoort, which are archived here in Kgatitswe probably, so that you trace this evolution of this location. Although I suspect those archives won't be of much help, but they will help somewhere, because at the end of the day, you may think like we have the health department now. You'll find that Wabona cemeteries were under another department, not directly under the town clerk and stuff like that. That would need serious navigation. But for what Dobsonville would be later, 50, 60 years to the removals from 1903 maybe to up to the time of the removals to to Dobsonville.
Already the removal was 1903, the removal from Bungees
to
Juliwe.
Juliwe. And another 50 years in Juliwe, removal from Juliwe to Dobsonville. Yeah. So it's quite a long history, this, evolution of this, what we call Dobsonville today. Yeah.